Roman Dmitri coldly leaned against the chair, his tone disdainful as he asserted that the Dmitri family was under no obligation to accept the unreasonable proposal from the Barco house, especially for such a trivial reason. Amid the lively atmosphere of the party, the ladies chatted animatedly and laughed, completely unaware of the underlying tension among the noble factions. One of the ladies, lavishly made up and wearing striking jewelry, smiled seductively as she prepared to approach the person she had been watching from afar. As Roman appeared, the girl quickly recognized him and called out his name loudly, showing excitement and inquiring about his absence throughout the party. Roman responded calmly that he had been busy handling business matters and regrettably had to leave the party at that moment, causing disappointment to clearly show on her face. Although those around wished to keep him there, Roman politely declined, citing an urgent matter, promising to talk more on another occasion. Despite the regretful glances, Roman left the party silently. The servant bowed to see him off as the door slowly closed behind him. Just as he stepped outside, Roman heard an angry shout directed straight at him, causing him to pause. It was a voice he could not mistake. Roman turned back and witnessed a chaotic scene among the guards, with rapid murmurs filling the air. Tension began to spread. A sudden strong slap landed. Roman's eyes widened in surprise and anger, marking the start of a tense confrontation ahead. A fierce slap accompanied by an angry shout from a Barco knight. "Who do you think you are?" The fury erupted after Kevin's act of resistance. Kevin was struck hard, his head turned to one side, cheek flushed red. He did not cry out, but a worried call of "Kevin" came from his comrades. Roman immediately turned around, hand on the sword hilt. His gaze was cold and sharp, ready to act if the situation crossed the line. His hand slid to the sword hilt in an instant, but hesitated and stopped halfway. Roman knew he could not intervene. A thought flashed through his mind. He could not cause trouble with the Barco knights. The conflict could ignite a feud between the two families. Roman told himself, if he caused a scene now, the consequences would affect not only him or Kevin, but the entire Dmitri family. Kevin forced himself to stand up, removed his helmet, and looked directly at his opponent. He declared with pride, "I am a guard of a master." Despite being hit, Kevin maintained his spirit. He spoke clearly, "I have no interest in fighting lowly scoundrels unworthy of being knights." The Barco knight sneered contemptuously, his voice full of mockery. "Oh, so heroic." He drew his sword, eyes blazing with murderous intent. "Fine, let's see how long you can keep that righteous face." He charged forward, intending to crush Kevin. As the punch was about to strike Kevin, a hand suddenly grabbed the attacker's wrist tightly, freezing the space in an instant. The knight was stunned, eyes wide with shock, unable to believe the unexpected reaction. Kevin also stared in astonishment, his face still marked by the recent beating, completely unprepared for someone to come to his aid. From afar, Amuro's sharp and cautious eyes watched the tense situation unfolding before him. Kevin exclaimed in surprise upon realizing that the one who intervened was Roman, the master he loyally protected, now personally stepping in. Roman looked straight ahead, his cold purple eyes shining with determination, showing no sign of concession. Before he could finish speaking, the knight was slapped hard by Roman, unable to react in time, his face twisted sharply to one side. Everyone fell silent, watching the scene before them. Roman stood upright, staring intently at the one who had been struck, freezing the entire atmosphere. The knight held his cheek, eyes confused and full of doubt, still unable to process what had just happened. He had been slapped without time to react. Just as he was about to respond with rude words, he received a second, even harsher slap, cutting off his anger before it could erupt. Surprised by the powerful slap, the knight froze, his eyes confused, not understanding what had just occurred. He staggered forward a step, gritting his teeth in anger. "You." But before he could finish speaking, he took another slap from Roman, this time stronger and more decisive. He screamed in pain, bent over holding his cheek, the humiliation leaving him completely speechless. Not giving his opponent time to recover, Roman delivered a third slap, forcing the arrogant man to bow his head in submission. He knelt down on the ground, his face battered and burning, unable to speak, only breathing heavily and groaning weakly. His eyes wide with panic, he only had time to hear a deep but icy voice say, "Hey." Roman looked down at the kneeling man, his gaze sharp as a sword, commanding, "Raise your head." In the pale candlelight of the hall, the Barco noble squatted on a luxurious sofa, head bowed low, shoulders trembling, shock and panic clearly visible on a face that had just moments before been composed. His eyes darted wildly, lips barely moving as he wondered, what the hell just happened? The thought tore through his mind, leaving him completely disoriented. Roman sat upright, his cold voice echoing through the room. "I demand you take responsibility for exploiting the Barco lady. I am doing you a favor, allowing you to marry a direct heir, but you have drawn an irreparable mistake yourself." Roman sneered, his sharp gaze tense like cold steel. "Do as you please. I have always been despised as a lowly man. What's one more scandal?" The hidden inferiority behind his mocking smile made the atmosphere even more suffocating. The Barco noble's eyes widened, stammering in confusion. "Please wait, sir." His nose and mouth trembled slightly. He could not believe Roman's words, swallowing each syllable as if a sword pierced his throat. Roman leaned back casually, his heavy gaze and calm tone tinged with sarcasm. "I broke the engagement on my own accord, not because of your threats. Dmitri has turned his back on Lawrence. You have achieved your goal, yet you still eagerly confront me. Ask yourself, how do you think I will react?" Darkness gradually covered the room as Roman murmured inwardly, "Even if it is just selfish sabotage, I will stand with Lawrence only to oppose Barco." Roman frowned, determination sparkling in his deep purple eyes. Roman's thoughts drifted slowly in the night. "I hold all the secrets about Barco. Their relationship with the central government and hidden powers cannot be underestimated. But ultimately, it is all authority based on reputation." In the last light of sunset, Roman's eyes suddenly brightened. "In terms of wealth and independent power, the top position in the Northeast belongs to the Dmitri family, not Barco." A quiet pride spread from deep within, like a smoldering flame promising coming storms. The Barco noble leaned forward on the sofa, gripping his knees tightly. The dark shadows behind him revealed his tense mood. Heavy thoughts echoed in his mind. "So, what do you intend to do from now on?" In the solemn living room, Barco lowered his head, his voice hoarse. "If everything stops here, you promise not to interfere in the affairs of the Lawrence family, right?" Opposite him, Roman crossed his arms, his gaze cold and confident. "Yes, I promise." Silence lingered before Barco's final thought flashed through his mind. Then, as Barco left the room, his rapid breath still lingered on his lips. Inwardly, he told himself, "Roman is completely different now." The beads of sweat on his forehead showed the rising unease. Barco was startled when he looked back at Roman's eyes. The cold purple eyes no longer held any warmth, simply an invisible pressure that made him feel as if his heart was being squeezed. "He hasn't just changed outwardly. His eyes, gestures, even the way he speaks, it's suffocating." Barco suddenly clasped his forehead, veins bulging clearly, lips tightly pressed. The turmoil and agonizing tension made him dizzy, as if he had poured all his mental energy into each labored breath. Suddenly a distant voice called, "Lord Anthony." Barco, startled, turned around then snapped, "Don't speak to me right now." His angry gesture made those around step back, adding to the chaos. A nearby knight murmured unnecessarily, "But Lord Roman seems to be reprimanding your guards." Barco looked up, his face blank. Those words made him even more confused, not understanding what was happening behind the scenes. A smack sound echoed from the distant castle, spreading across the square. The afternoon sun dyed the dome pink, beautiful yet stirring the stifling atmosphere like a threatening echo that made everyone turn their heads. In the crowd, a lady covered her mouth in shock, her eyes wide, hands trembling as she raised them to cover the corner of her mouth upon seeing the violent scene ahead, her ears still ringing from the sharp slap that echoed back. Among the bodyguards, a few wore shocked expressions, mouths tight, unable to believe it. Their eyes hovered between astonishment and fear. Everyone realized that Roman's power had reached a level where anyone daring to defy him would pay the price immediately. Before the sunset, a guard knelt trembling at Roman's feet, begging for forgiveness. He sobbed, pleading for mercy and promising not to repeat his mistakes, but Roman silently stood watching, showing no emotion. Two people nearby quickly spoke up to intervene, believing the punishment was enough and advising Roman to stop. One reminded of the relationship between the Dmitri and Barco families, hoping to preserve the reputations among the clans. Roman calmly responded, his gaze icy cold. He asserted that only he had the right to decide the punishment, and if the man had to die, it was a deserved price for his insolent behavior. The crowd suddenly stirred as Anthony appeared full of anger, his resentful gaze sweeping over the scene. He loudly questioned what was happening, and the atmosphere grew tense. Anthony could not control his anger, pointed at Roman and shouted. Despite Roman being the eldest son of the Dmitri family, he threatened Roman to apologize on the spot or face consequences. Roman raised his face, coldly replying with a question that left Anthony speechless. "What do I need to apologize for?" The confidence and calmness in Roman's eyes made the atmosphere even heavier. A wounded Dmitri guard trembled as he spoke up. He accused being insulted and assaulted, trying desperately to shift all blame onto Roman's side as an attempt to deflect responsibility. Roman turned to face Anthony directly, asking a question that made his opponent uneasy. "Do you really think I'm wrong, Anthony Barco?" Roman's sharp gaze left Anthony stammering without words. Anthony struggled to refute, claiming Roman's actions were beyond limits, but the lack of confidence in his tone only made him appear weaker against the overwhelming aura of his opponent. Roman took slow, deliberate steps forward, his voice calm yet threatening. He repeated his initial warning and forced Anthony to carefully consider how to behave toward him in the future. Anthony's face stiffened, fear unmistakably showing. Roman closed in, his eyes full of murderous intent, lowering his voice to warn Anthony that his patience had limits. The cold declaration made the atmosphere suffocating. Anthony found himself in a dilemma. The thought crossed his mind that if he sided with Lawrence, at least he could make things difficult for Barco, whom he truly despised. Anthony's hand clenched tightly in suppressed anger. He knew he was being forced, but could not resist Roman's overwhelming presence. After a long internal struggle, Anthony finally yielded. He reluctantly admitted Roman was right and agreed with the punishment of his subordinate. A forced smile appeared at the corner of Anthony's mouth, showing agreement. He said he would have done the same if in that situation. Roman turned away with satisfaction, affirming that they had reached a common understanding. His smile betrayed his triumph. Roman coldly turned to the punished man. As the man looked up, Roman briefly said, "Good, now get ready to go." Not giving the soldier time to react, Roman raised his hand and issued a threatening order. "Better grit your teeth." His eyes flashed fiercely like thunder, signaling an impending rage. People gradually left, leaving Roman standing silently by the railing. His heart had not yet calmed from the recent storm. A gentle breeze blew as Roman stood with his back to the horizon. A thought echoed in his mind, my past life. In the past, Roman had nothing remarkable except relying on the reputation of the Dmitri family, a prestigious clan in the northeast. All he had was the shadow of that powerful family. Roman's personal reputation was a joke to the world. In everyone's eyes, he was just a fool without talent, not respected by anyone. But now, he was the leader calling Kevin and Chris to leave with him. However, after the recent incident, those who witnessed it could not hide their astonishment. Their eyes no longer held contempt, but were filled with shock and confusion. From knights to commoners, all present had to admit one thing: the undeniable truth was clearly before their eyes. No matter how much they wanted to deny it, they had to accept that the image of the foolish Roman from before had completely vanished from this world. Roman, calm and resolute, strode through the crowd. Chris and Kevin followed silently. Behind them, whispers and suspicious glances seemed meaningless, because the Roman of today was a completely different person. The evening sky descended, the fiery red sunset stretching across the treetops. In the silent atmosphere, a sudden strong gust of wind whistled through, signaling that something was about to happen. Inside the swaying carriage, the pounding heartbeat echoed anxiously within the two young knights. Kevin bowed his head sadly, while Chris sat beside him, his eyes full of contemplation and seriousness. Kevin bowed his head to apologize to Roman, feeling guilty for causing the situation to become chaotic. Shame was clearly visible on his face as he faced his leader. Chris also spoke up, admitting his fault. He felt responsible because his actions had humiliated the Dmitri family, and he had not remained calm enough when Kevin was attacked. Roman sat opposite, silently listening. He said nothing, letting the silence make the atmosphere heavier. A soft thump sounded, emphasizing the tension building up. Finally, Roman spoke, his calm gaze directed at the two before him. He thanked them for their patience, for restraining themselves despite being insulted. Roman's voice was cold but resolute. He affirmed that rashness only leads to worse consequences, and it was their composure that helped them avoid tragedy. However, immediately after, his tone turned icy. Roman bluntly stated that he did not want to hear any more explanations, cutting off all unfinished excuses. Looking out the window, Roman emphasized the status of the Dmitri house. Throughout the northeastern region of the Cairo kingdom, no one could match the reputation of this family. And finally, he instructed them, though they must be patient, they must never forget those who insulted them. Roman wanted them to remember that anger and transform it into strength for the future. In the gloomy night, a silver-haired man tied his hair high, his eyes full of arrogance, silently vowing never to let anyone surpass him. His ambition surged like a thick black mist surrounding him. Roman sat cross-legged in the carriage, his cold eyes looking forward. With an authoritative tone, he declared that all must kneel before him, and anyone wishing to serve him must accept this as inevitable. Kevin and Chris sat beside him, attentively listening to every word. Roman ended his instructions with a clear command. This was what they were obliged to do if they wanted to survive under the Dmitri name. Outside, the carriage continued rolling steadily along the forest trail, the clack-clack sound echoing in the quiet scene, as if time itself was waiting for the advance of something great. In a bright villa in the city center, a voice sounded, delivering a report that Roman had requested from the Black Moon Society, an organization specializing in gathering underground intelligence. The content concerned the Barco family. A servant stood before Roman's desk, reporting that the Barco house had recently shown suspicious movements. This change made everyone cautious. Roman carefully read the documents, softly uttering a thoughtful ahem. The pages in his hands flipped quickly, carrying a premonition of upcoming troubles. The narrative revealed the origin of the Barco family, a clan rooted in the northeast region for over a century. But only when a member entered the central government did they truly rise to power. An iconic image appeared atop a tall tower, symbolizing central authority. Thanks to relatives joining the government, the Barco family gradually gained influence in this land. Roman continued flipping through the documents and pondered. Although Barco held a high status, they clearly lacked military strength. This surprised him because with such a reputation, Roman had thought they would have stronger military backing. As he turned another page, Roman quietly noted that despite lacking military power, the Barco house maintained its position thanks to strong support from the central government. The materials further provided an overview of the Salamander continent, which includes 2 empires and 6 kingdoms. The Cairo kingdom, though small, occupies a strategic position bordering many countries and has been invaded multiple times in the past. Because it frequently faces external threats, Cairo is forced to form a close alliance with the central government to survive. As a result, the central authority's power has expanded, especially its absolute right to conscript soldiers. Those who refuse conscription are considered a danger to the nation. The government immediately dispatches soldiers to capture and deal with them. Once caught, all assets and land of the draft evader will be confiscated. The lords who help capture them will receive a share of the confiscated property and be granted new noble titles by the kingdom. The steward was shocked by this strict power system, upon learning that it had helped the Barco house rise to hold invisible influence within the court. Roman confirmed that it was thanks to that power that the Barco house was able to borrow a huge sum from the Golden Bank, an unimaginable feat for their usual status. He further clarified that this loan was granted without collateral, entirely based on the Barco house's credit. Currently, the entire amount has been transferred to the Burge Mercenary Guild. The Burge Guild is a mercenary organization consisting of over 100 top-tier members. They mainly earn money by participating in conflicts between nations. Based on recruitment and financial movements, Roman speculated that the Barco house would launch an attack on Lawrence within the next 2 weeks. He concluded that Barco's invasion plan was nearly ready. The steward anxiously asked whether war would really happen and if Lawrence still had any chance of survival. In response, the other calmly assessed that even if Lawrence tried to avoid battle, it could only hold out for a month. Sitting pensively behind his desk, Roman Dmitri recalled his promise to Anthony Barco that he would not interfere in anything related to Lawrence, a promise he was now reconsidering. In his thoughts, Roman affirmed that if he lived under the name Roman Dmitri, he could not allow House Barco to run rampant. Even if Barco tried to flaunt its power in his eyes, they were nothing compared to House Dmitri. Roman admitted that if he wanted, he could easily punish Barco by calling on his family's support. But for him, such an easy path was too boring to choose. Roman understood that his commoner origins were not the reason the northeastern nobility despised him, simply because they had never seen him as a significant threat. What Roman needed now was not recognition or excuses, but an opportunity to strike just like he had done before. Without hesitation, Roman called hands and decisively stood up from his desk, determined to meet his father immediately to begin the next important step. Roman knew clearly that to carry out this plan, he needed the promise his father had made in the past, a promise that could change everything. The clear blue sky opened a new scene, signaling a turning point about to unfold in the fate of Roman and his family. At the bustling market, people suddenly turned around upon hearing a loud noise, the unexpected arrival of a figure attracting everyone's attention. The sound of metal footsteps startled those in the market. The sudden appearance of an armored soldier covered in blood made the atmosphere tense. The armored soldier, though clearly having endured a fierce battle, still strode proudly through the market, leaving behind astonished and wary gazes from the crowd. Upon reaching his destination, the soldier removed his helmet, breathing a sigh of relief after a long and arduous journey. Revealed beneath the armor was Lucas, a B-rank mercenary. He muttered that the Dmitri land remained unchanged, implying its harshness and strict discipline. Lucas arrived at a familiar blacksmith shop in the area, where the symbol of a hammer and anvil swung in the morning sunlight. Inside the shop, Lucas began removing his heavily damaged armor, complaining that all his equipment had been completely ruined after the battle. The old blacksmith laughed when he saw Lucas's condition, teasing him about the fierce battle he had just endured. Lucas frowned as he recounted nearly losing his life to overly aggressive foes. Looking closely at the sword, the blacksmith noticed its poor quality and questioned the origin of the weapons Lucas had brought. Lucas sighed, explaining that they were made at a new workshop, one he had once thought he could trust, as it had helped him survive. But the blacksmith laughed loudly, claiming nothing could compare to Dimitri's quality. Lucas responded pragmatically, emphasizing that was exactly why he returned here. The blacksmith nodded, but reminded him that remaking all the equipment from scratch would take time. Lucas closed the door and stepped outside, deciding to spend some time resting at Dimitri after continuous days of fighting. He sighed, admitting that he was too exhausted from the battlefield and needed to find some peace of mind. While strolling down the street, Lucas suddenly noticed a crowd gathered in front of a bulletin board, prompting his curiosity to stop and observe. He tilted his head, wondering about the cause of the crowd, sensing the lively chatter around him. Lucas's eyes briefly showed worry as he wondered if a new war was about to break out, something he was trying to avoid during his rest. Curiosity quickly overcame caution, and Lucas pushed into the crowd determined to find answers. Before him was a recruitment notice, which caught his surprise and attention. The notice clearly stated that Dimitri was recruiting 30 knights, requiring good physical condition and strong will, with an attractive salary of 8 silver coins per month. Lucas silently evaluated the pay. 5 silver coins were enough to support a whole family, so 8 was not a small amount, especially for a dangerous job. However, reading the last line carefully, he frowned. This position was not under the Dimitri house but directly under Roman Dimitri, and only accepted those willing to sacrifice for him. Upon hearing about the recruitment notice, a local showed disdain and sneered, telling the blue-haired young man not to dream of applying because hundreds had already registered. The young man sneered back, asserting he was a B-rank mercenary and that to be loyal to a noble, at least 50 silver coins per month would be worth considering. Suddenly, his eyes flashed, as if realizing something important that made him stop to think. He turned to confirm with the local about the number of applicants and asked in return whether the position was really worth it. The young man frowned, doubting the true benefits of the job, thinking that no matter how good the pay was, he still had to serve the one known as the fool of the Dimitri house. A nearby woman interjected with concern, saying no one knew what they would have to endure when becoming a knight under Roman Dimitri's command. Suddenly, a strange atmosphere from the crowd caught the young man's attention. He turned with a surprised look as everyone around reacted simultaneously. The local sternly explained that the young man was clearly an outsider who didn't know the story, that Roman was no longer as he used to be. He continued that Roman Dimitri had once defeated the Blood Fang group and now treated everyone with absolute respect, leaving the mercenary stunned. The locals added that at first they didn't believe it either, but everyone was convinced after hearing the whole story from Clark, a name that made the young man even more curious. One local recounted that Clark's family had been very poor until his son began working for Lord Roman, after which their lives completely changed. While thinking, the storyteller suddenly wondered what Clark's son's name was, as his gaze passed over freshly baked, fragrant loaves of bread in the shop. Then, as if remembering, he muttered the name Kevin, the boy who was smiling brightly while stepping out of the bakery with a bag of bread in hand, looking radiant and proud. As dusk fell, a surprised voice echoed from the upper floor of a magnificent mansion. Someone had just heard something unbelievable. Kevin, the young soldier, stood stunned upon hearing about the leave. His eyes clearly showed confusion, as he had never heard anything like this in his military life. With a serious face, Roman confirmed the 3-day leave order. According to him, rest is an essential part of training to ensure strong physical and mental health. Roman gently turned to Kevin, his eyes full of sympathy. He told him to set everything aside and return to his family after the hard times he had endured. Kevin looked at his master with emotion. Surprised by the unexpected care, he could only nod and reply in a slightly trembling voice, "Yes, sir." The next morning, the chirping birds by the window woke Kevin. The clear blue sky seemed to signal a rare peaceful day that he was about to experience. Standing by the wardrobe, Kevin held up a simple shirt, hesitatingly repeating the words leave. To him, it was still too new and strange. Wearing the casual shirt, Kevin felt unfamiliar. He was confused because until now, resting meant no income to live on. He stepped out of the room, his heart heavy with homesickness. Since leaving for training, Kevin had never met his relatives and now could only hope they were doing well. A familiar call rang out. "Kevin!" It was Hans, his close friend. Kevin turned around, a smile briefly appearing on his lips as he saw the familiar face. The butler was surprised to see Kevin still wearing old clothes to visit home, and immediately handed him a new outfit prepared by Lord Roman himself. Not only clothes, Kevin was also given a bag of money to buy gifts for his family, along with news of a more generous new salary than before. Kevin was stunned to learn he could freely use that money for his family or himself as a reward for his long efforts. In his new clothes and holding a bag of fragrant bread, Kevin happily walked through the market, his eyes sparkling with simple happiness. For the first time in his life, Kevin felt the softness and comfort of high-quality clothes, making him feel as if he were living in a dream. Kevin looked at the warm, fresh bread bag, satisfied that he could finally buy plenty of delicious bread for the whole family to enjoy. Kevin remembered Marie, his little sister who once wished to eat fresh bread with cream, and imagined her joy upon seeing this gift. Memories surfaced as Kevin recalled how Marie often complained about the hard bread the family had to eat every day. Until now, Kevin had never had enough money to buy fresh bread for his sister because their price was twice that of the old kind. But today, everything was different. As he reached the house door before he could call out, he suddenly heard a loud knock and his name shouted in panic. A surprise awaited ahead. In the heavy darkness of the cellar, Kevin's whole family huddled, trembling with fear. Kevin held his sister tightly while his parents just bowed their heads helplessly before the disaster that had just struck. Kevin clenched his coat, his heart overflowing with emotion. A silent vow was formed, coming from the depths of this young boy's soul. He promised himself that under Lord Roman's guidance, he would become strong to protect his family from such horrors forevermore. The sky was clear, a gentle breeze brushed through the trees, and a simple house appeared, the place Kevin was heading toward, carrying hope and a quiet determination. Just reaching the alley entrance, Kevin paused. His eyes widened in surprise as he noticed something different where his family's dilapidated house once stood. A woman was sipping tea in the yard, her eyes peaceful and smile gentle, as if she had never experienced those hard days. The father laughed heartily, holding a fried cake as if enjoying a relaxing morning never before had. Kevin's little sister played among the flower garden, her clear laughter ringing throughout the space, adding charm to the fairy tale-like peaceful scene. Standing before that scene, Kevin was stunned. The dazzling, dreamlike lights made him unable to believe his eyes. Everything looked too different, too good to be true. Marie looked back, her face suddenly understanding. Now she realized why they hadn't taken Kevin back to the slum as before, because this place was no longer a slum. In a gloomy corner, Kevin's whole family trembled in fear, kneeling on the ground under the horror that engulfed them, their eyes full of anxiety and despair. Kevin clenched his hands to his chest, his eyes shining with determination, a vow echoing in his heart like an unshakable declaration. He swore to become stronger under Lord Roman's guidance, never letting his family fall into such misery again. The scene shifted to daytime, sunlight shining down on the new house, peaceful and spacious, as if signaling a turning point in Kevin's life. On the quiet road, Kevin carried a loaf of bread, suddenly stopping in surprise at something that left him astonished. Kevin's mother smiled gently, holding a cup of tea, a peaceful image completely opposite to the dark memories of the past. His father sat laughing heartily, holding a cake, his radiant face showing that their life had truly changed. Kevin's little sister played among the flower garden, her clear laughter echoing throughout the yard, spreading the new life the family was enjoying. Kevin stood silently in the garden, looking up at the brilliant sky, his heart overflowing with emotion as he saw his family happily gathered together. The innocent girl suddenly realized something strange when she remembered the original instructions were to go to the slum, not this well-off suburb. The mother gently placed her hand on Kevin's shoulder, her eyes clearly worried. She asked him to speak honestly, and if what he was enduring was too much, the whole family would leave this place immediately. Kevin hastily denied in panic, firmly assuring that Lord Roman would never treat him badly. But that explanation was not enough, as his parents still doubted when they saw the wounds on their son's face. Finally, Kevin sighed and prepared to explain everything to his parents. He called them seriously and began to clarify the misunderstanding about his injuries. As Kevin recounted the events, many people remained skeptical. They whispered and doubted his story. But Kevin firmly insisted the fact that his family had their current life could not be a coincidence. A man recounted that Kevin said Lord Roman once slapped a knight of House Barco to protect his subordinate. The story left everyone astonished because no noble would act like that for someone under their command. A gasp of astonishment rang out from the market as the news spread. Many people couldn't believe it, since in their eyes, Lord Roman was just a useless man. But then they were convinced when they saw the clear change in the Clark family. A villager pointed out that thanks to Kevin becoming Roman's knight, the entire Clark family had a transformed life. The man continued, emphasizing that it was Lord Roman who gave the Clark family a house and land, and once protected Kevin from a House Barco knight. All of this was because Kevin had been chosen by Roman as his own. The woman couldn't hide her emotion, exclaiming that just recently she still felt pity for their family, yet now they had a dream life, all thanks to Lord Roman's unexpected kindness. In another corner, two young men chatted. One recalled seeing Roman drunk and causing trouble, but the other doubted it was really him, thinking it was just someone who looked similar. The truth about Roman seemed more complicated than rumors suggested. The mysterious man began persuading his listeners that if they could gain Lord Roman's trust, their future would be completely changed. He continued by citing the case of the Clark family, who had turned their lives around thanks to Roman's favor. With a hopeful voice, the storyteller affirmed that Lord Roman's trust could bring them an entirely new life. The morning scene bathed in sunlight appeared as rumors spread everywhere, causing people to flock out of curiosity and hope. Someone in the crowd explained that this was the reason so many people registered for the new position, the opportunity to be chosen by Lord Roman. Faced with the strange situation, a young man with a doubtful expression wondered what was happening. He began to piece together the events and suspected it was all orchestrated by Roman. In a tavern, someone objected, firmly asserting that the Roman Dmitri he knew could not do such things. Just 2 years ago he was drunk and causing chaos over gambling losses. The crowd continued to whisper, doubting how Roman had changed over the past 2 years, and what could have made him become a different person. The mysterious young man smiled intriguingly at the rumors and unexpected changes about Roman. Curiosity and interest were clearly visible in his eyes. Under the quiet night sky, a voice confirmed that preparations for the examination were progressing smoothly, promising an important turning point ahead. A voice confirmed that they had agreed to deploy the minimum number of personnel to maintain order, and that Roman himself would directly supervise the entire event. In a quiet room, an elderly man solemnly declared that the moment had come, his eyes heavy and thoughtful. A knight wearing a red cloak approached to remind him that this was the last chance to stop everything. He asked if the man was truly ready to accept all the consequences. While pouring wine, the old man continued to hear warnings. Roman's desire to train a private cavalry force was very dangerous, and he should inquire clearly about Roman's true purpose. He quietly called the name Jonathan, showing seriousness in his mind and shifting to a deeper story. He recalled when he learned Roman attended a Barco social party. He thought Roman was plotting to ally with House Barco to eliminate his younger brother, preventing him from succeeding their position. However, the next memory was of Roman slapping a Barco knight in front of nobles, ignoring Anthony's warnings. He knew Anthony's character well, a man who easily allied with his second son out of jealousy, creating threats within the family. Because of this, he always thought all plans aimed to prevent Roman from becoming the official heir of the Dmitri family. Setting down his glass firmly on the table, he admitted Roman had been a public laughingstock for many years. But since the Blood Fangs incident, Roman had begun to control his own destiny. Roman's father, with a solemn face and determined eyes, acknowledged his role. As a father, he wished for nothing more than to support his son on his journey to change fate. The loyal soldier nodded in confirmation of the order. Though still having many doubts inside, he strictly obeyed the Lord's decision with clear respect. Sitting in the study, the father sighed, thinking Roman's reputation would hardly attract applicants. But when asked about the number of registrations, the soldier's vague answer hinted at a surprising revelation. The servant reported with surprise that the number of applicants had exceeded 500, startling Roman's father so much he nearly dropped his wine glass. Faced with that unexpected number, he could only exclaim in shock, completely unable to believe what he had just heard. The bright dawn illuminated the fortress, signaling the day of the selection exam had arrived, and the atmosphere became tenser than ever. A large crowd of candidates gathered before the gate, whispers and chatter echoing everywhere, each wearing anxious expressions. Among the crowd, some prominent faces appeared, including a young man with blue hair, sharp eyes, and a scar on his cheek, attracting much attention. On the fortress wall, footsteps echoed, marking the arrival of an important figure about to step out. A blond young man entered, respectfully calling "Sir," announcing that everything was ready for the examination. From afar, the leader wearing a red cloak confirmed that preparations were complete, ready for the greatest challenge to begin. In a moment of silence, Roman turned his head, his eyes sharp and calm, looking forward, preparing to face everything. The moon hung high in the quiet night sky, its gentle light casting over the rooftops in Dmitri. In the peaceful darkness, the lights from a small inn still shone brightly, signaling life and ongoing conversations inside. A man with moss-green hair tilted his head back and drained a large mug of beer. The amber liquid seemed to awaken excitement within him after a long day. After the refreshing sip, he smiled contentedly and cheerfully exclaimed. The dark beer brewed in Dmitri still retained its rich, smooth flavor that he couldn't help but admire. Although the beer's alcohol had spread through his blood, he maintained a serious expression, his eyes reflecting deep thought. Something more important was occupying his mind at that moment. He was surprised to realize that tonight the inn was more crowded than expected. The large gathering signaled that tomorrow's examination would be much fiercer than initially imagined. In a corner of the inn, 3 loud men laughed and talked, catching his attention. Their laughter filled the space, full of energy and confidence. Based on the bronze badges attached to their belts, he identified them as C-rank mercenaries. Though not very strong, they were experienced enough to show battle-hardened resilience. Additionally, the group gathered drinking at the bar also drew attention. Though they did not resemble mercenaries, they exuded the aura of well-trained warriors. Just in this small inn, there were quite a few talented candidates. He thought silently of countless other inns in Dimitri City. The number of quality applicants surely exceeded expectations, making the recruitment standards harsher than ever. Holding his beer mug, he pondered deeply. If they were all seasoned warriors, they would have had better opportunities. They could not have come just out of curiosity like him. They were surely aiming for something more important. Looking at the bustling crowd in the inn, the young man slammed his empty mug on the table, confusedly admitting that he still did not understand everything. An old acquaintance suddenly appeared, calling Henderson's name and expressing surprise to see him here, having previously heard he would become a knight of the Lawrence family. Henderson looked up at the old acquaintance, his eyes quiet, showing some surprise and caution at being recognized among the crowd. Still calm, Henderson admitted that was his original plan, as Lawrence was the homeland he was attached to. However, his gaze darkened as he recalled the decisive moment that changed everything, the moment he witnessed Roman Dimitri defeat the Blood Fang at Lawrence. Henderson recounted from memory that not everyone believed that story, but he, who was present at the time, had seen it all with his own eyes. He clearly remembered Roman Dimitri drenched in blood, dragging the Blood Fang leader out of the building, as a declaration that could not be stronger. Henderson silently admired. A young noble dared to personally go to another land just because his people were threatened, an act that stunned everyone. Henderson's eyes sparkled with emotion, recalling that memorable moment. A powerful energy that once filled the air that day still remained deeply imprinted in his mind. Meanwhile, at the next table, 3 soldiers continued their discussion. Despite doubts, one of them affirmed that he had felt the atmosphere then, proof that Roman Dimitri was not as weak as rumor. The young man slammed his hand on the table, his eyes shining with intense admiration. He declared emotionally that Roman Dimitri was a true leader, ready to fight for his own people. The atmosphere in the inn was filled with determination, as another person asserted. This recruitment was a golden opportunity to serve under Roman Dimitri. He expressed a desire to live and fight as a citizen of Dimitri's land. Hearing those words, Henderson seemed moved. Doubt surged within him. Was Roman Dimitri truly worthy of his loyalty? Night fell, golden light streaming through the window frame. In his thoughts, Henderson began to suspect that everyone rushing to become Roman's knights might not be a coincidence. Dawn broke over the Dimitri training ground. The cheerful chirping of birds welcomed the day of the recruitment exam that would determine many fates. At the training yard, the candidates chatted lively. Some planned to celebrate after the exam, even joking that the loser would have to buy drinks, creating an atmosphere full of excitement. Amid the laughter and chatter, Henderson quietly pondered. If what he heard was true, he wondered which path he would choose when the decisive moment came. He believed he was not the only one harboring doubts. Many had come because of Roman's reputation, but were still waiting to verify the truth for themselves. Under a starry rain that seemed prophetic, Henderson understood that soon everyone would see Roman Dimitri's true nature, and then each of them would have to make their own choice. A sudden silence fell. Henderson clearly felt a change in the air, his eyes wide with surprise. Something was about to happen. Amid the unexpected silence, a decisive footstep echoed, signaling the arrival of the most awaited figure. Roman Dimitri appeared with 2 escorts, walking straight down the line of candidates standing solemnly, making the atmosphere tense and filled with respect. A gentle breeze brushed past as Roman approached, his calm gaze and cold demeanor making everyone dare not look him directly in the eye. Each of his footsteps rang clearly on the ground, producing a sharp clack sound, as if suppressing the breath of the surrounding crowd. Without any instruction, hundreds simultaneously bowed their heads and stepped aside, opening a path for Roman to pass, showing absolute respect for his overwhelming presence. The green-haired young man silently observed, amazed to see everyone act instinctively, yielding way to Roman without orders. He silently confirmed that the rumors were true. Roman Dimitri's aura and dignity were not exaggerated. The quiet atmosphere was broken by firm footsteps as Roman ascended the stone stairs toward the center of the examination area. Each step on the stone stairs sounded like war drums, attracting everyone's gaze, every eye fixed on him. Roman turned around, cold yet dignified, and commanded, "Raise your heads." The 2 nearest Most candidates shivered slightly and immediately complied, reacting as if accustomed to the orders of a true king. Before the large crowd gathered in the square, Roman stood on a high podium and declared that today he would select 30 people to become his knights, as previously announced. But before starting, he had an important announcement to make. With determined eyes, Roman Dmitri boldly declared that he had no intention of living an ordinary life in this small land. His ambition went far beyond the borders of Dmitri territory. He frankly stated that the road ahead would be full of dangers, and those who followed him would inevitably have to risk their lives. If anyone was not ready to take this role seriously, it was best to leave immediately. Roman emphasized that if one day they died on the battlefield, their regret should not be being forced by him, but something greater. His voice grew strong and powerful as he affirmed, the only regret they would have was not witnessing him rise to the top and conquer the entire continent. The crowd below was stunned. They did not expect someone once underestimated like Roman to utter such resolute words. All eyes were on him. The scar-faced young man frowned skeptically. He could not understand what Roman was saying. Someone who was almost kicked out of his home now dreamed of conquering a continent. But then he hesitated in thought. With an inexplicable intuition, he felt Roman truly could accomplish what he had just declared. Immediately after, the assistant stepped forward, announcing the start of the first round of the selection. Everyone focused intently. The rules were simple. Each candidate must stand still at a designated spot, while an archer shoots 3 arrows at them to test their reaction and courage. A dummy stood before a wooden board, 2 arrows lodged close to its shoulder. The test began with a chilling warning that the arrows might just graze the skin. However, danger was always near. If an arrow veered slightly, it could pierce the head of the person standing there, ending their life instantly. The assistant clearly explained the rule. Only those who did not flinch even slightly when the arrows were shot could pass the first round. Each candidate listened anxiously, as he declared that only those who maintained their composure were qualified to proceed. A summons echoed across the training ground. Candidates would be called one by one, starting with Dirk, followed by Morrison, ready and waiting. In the vast training yard, the twang of the bowstring rang out as the first arrow whistled through the air, marking the start of the dangerous test. One candidate watched the scene with doubt. Despite warnings that he might be shot, he still believed it was just a scare tactic to test resolve. He convinced himself that no one would deliberately kill those recruiting. It was too crazy to be true. Seeing the archer standing at a distance, he was sure this was a professional who never made mistakes when taking aim. With focused eyes and decisive movement, the archer drew the bowstring fully and released. The arrow shot like lightning, challenging the courage of the person ahead. The arrow flew like a flash, striking directly into the shoulder of the standing candidate, blood spraying in extreme horror. The young man gasped, trying to reassure himself that this was just a test of will, while others nervously awaited their turn. The archer drew the bowstring decisively, his determined gaze showing confidence that nothing bad would happen if the candidates held their positions. The candidate stood motionless, telling himself all arrows would miss, but one struck his thigh, causing blood to spread on the ground. Another candidate looked at the scene in stunned silence, speechless at the real danger of the challenge. The reaction quickly spread through the crowd. Witnesses showed clear horror, while the scar-faced young man remained cold and unshaken. The face of one candidate showed tension and confusion as he saw his comrade fall from an arrow wound. A painful scream rang out as the injured candidate collapsed in a pool of blood. The supervisor immediately called for medical aid amid the chaotic atmosphere. A male medic ordered a stretcher brought over, while those nearby hurried to assist, worry evident on everyone's faces. The injured young man was carried away on a stretcher amid the crowd's restless gaze. Blood still soaked his leg, and painful groans continued to echo. The remaining candidates were shocked beyond belief. They had not expected the test truly required them to stand still and accept the risk of being shot with real arrows. Fear was evident on each face as they exclaimed in panic, "Impossible!" The group of candidates was stunned upon realizing the test was truly to prepare them mentally for being shot directly by arrows. Worried eyes and sweat rolling down cheeks showed suspicion and panic spreading through the ranks. The cold judge stepped out from behind a partition and called the next person, his gaze sweeping over the pressured crowd. The atmosphere was suffocatingly silent as everyone watched his every step. The named candidate, Morrison, immediately startled, his terrified expression impossible to hide. His eyes clearly showed fear as his name echoed through the tense silence. Blood spread red across the wooden floor like a chilling warning. Morrison vividly recalled the arrow piercing the thigh of the person before. If it had hit the head, that person would have died instantly. The thought paralyzed him. Panic began to spread through the crowd. Some candidates started murmuring, expressing doubt and dissatisfaction. No one expected a recruitment test to be truly lethal like this. The blond man calmly confirmed the situation. As Roman said, those who give up will be eliminated. Morrison was disqualified for not stepping forward. Rules are rules, ruthless and unforgiving. A blunt warning was issued. Those afraid of being shot should withdraw immediately. The discouraged lowered their heads and left the line amid sobs and their own disappointed gazes. The white-haired knight spoke firmly, his gaze cold but serious. Only those who could endure the shot were qualified to proceed to the next round. This was not just a physical test, but a true challenge of courage. Standing before the large door, a commanding voice rang out, asking everyone to listen to the role instructions once again, preparing for the upcoming challenge. The line of contestants stood in a straight row, attentively listening as they were informed that tomorrow they would have to face arrows in the first test. The white-haired man pointed to his archer, confidently declaring him an excellent marksman who would shoot at non-lethal spots to ensure the safety of the contestants. The manager stood before the group of contestants, raised a notebook, and began announcing the rewards they would receive if they accepted to participate in this harsh test. The chest full of gold was opened. The coins sparkling under the light brightened the entire room, attracting everyone's gaze. The contestants could not hide their amazement and excitement. Their eyes lit up as they witnessed the huge prize money for those who passed the challenge. The commander reassured the group of contestants, saying that medical staff would be on standby to prevent serious injuries, but at the same time emphasized that being hit by an arrow was certain. When the final question was asked, everyone answered in unison, yes, showing their determination to overcome the challenge despite knowing the danger ahead. A solemn atmosphere enveloped the room as the door closed after the last instructions. The contestants were allowed to leave, preparing mentally for tomorrow. Immediately after, an assistant turned to question his superior, not understanding why such a tense and dramatic challenge had to be created. In the luxurious office, the blond man stood solemnly before the master, opening by wanting to reiterate everyone's roles once more. He clearly declared, tomorrow all contestants would have to endure the first challenge, being shot with arrows. With a confident smile, he introduced a skilled archer who would take on this task, ensuring that every shot would avoid critical points. Not just words, he also showed them the worthy reward they would receive after the mission, capturing everyone's attention. When the golden chest opened and glittered, surprise and excitement were evident on each face, everyone's eyes shining brightly. The white-haired man emphasized that a medical team was on standby but still warned bluntly, despite preparations, they would be shot with arrows. He directly asked if they had enough courage to continue. The candidates shouted loudly in unison, showing determination not to back down despite the danger awaiting ahead. When there were no more questions, he allowed them to leave. The door closed with a heavy thud, ending the briefing session. After everyone left, the blond man turned to ask his superior why such a tense act had to be staged. The cold master replied, to select true knights, he could not just threaten empty words. He needed them to truly face the feeling of being close to death, because only those with steel spirit deserved to stand in his ranks. Kevin, without hesitation, was even willing to cut off his own hand to prove his determination. As for Chris, despite losing badly, he still bowed his head to ask his opponent to teach him how to become stronger. It is precisely such people, born with the heart of a beast, who are worthy. Although not possessing absolute strength, they always overcome adversity. Roman understood that only the weak feared challenges. He needed this test to filter, keeping only those truly worthy. The wind howled across the clear blue sky. Inside the towering fortress, the next challenges awaited. A candidate was panting heavily, a clear sign of anxiety and tension, but he had not given up yet. Among the silent crowd, someone recognized that he had seen this guy at the inn yesterday. He thought silently, has he not withdrawn yet? Others also noticed that guy, one trembling in the corner, but full of determination. Despite fear, he had not turned back. While tears streamed down, his eyes shone with resolve. This was his chance to prove loyalty to Lord Roman. He braced himself and stepped out into the arena. With his heart burning, he would not allow himself to give up without a fight. And then, in a life-or-death moment, an arrow tore through the air toward him. He faced it head-on. The moment to prove his courage had arrived. Henderson turned his head, shocked to see a dart stuck right next to his face. That moment made his heart skip a beat from sheer surprise. The archer drew his bow with a cold expression, internally debating whether to give up, but his hand did not tremble under pressure. Just as Henderson was about to give up, arrows continued to whistle through the air toward him. In that brush with death, he felt the fragility of life acutely. Another contestant stood in the waiting line, eyes bewildered as he saw the blazing red arrow land near Henderson, hesitating whether to quit to save his own life. After the suspense and fear, Henderson opened his eyes and looked straight ahead. The final dart landed spectacularly close to the wooden board behind him. A clear voice rang out in the training ground. "Henderson passed." Henderson collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath while his whole body still trembled. An observer standing outside squinted and smirked. He thought to himself, if it had lasted a bit longer, he would have surely given up. Pure luck. At the end of the first round, only the bravest contestants remained. Though each wore a different expression, all had passed through the gate of death. Out of a total of 400 registrants, after eliminating those who quit, only a small portion had enough courage and luck to advance to the next round. In the end, only 120 people passed the first challenge, a tiny number among the crowd that once set foot in the arena. The selection process was entering a more brutal phase. After the first test ended, the commander officially appeared before all the contestants. He declared that through the recent challenge, he had identified those among them with the highest value. Among the crowd, some contestants like Henderson were still trembling after what they had experienced. Their expressions reflected a fear that had yet to subside. In contrast, some like the blue-haired boy with a scar on his face remained calm, clearly showing resilience and confidence. However, to the commander, that did not matter. The only thing he valued was the courage to overcome fear, the essential quality for survival in the harsh world ahead. He understood that everyone came here with different goals and backgrounds. What he sought were rough gems, those who could shine even unpolished, those who would not back down before his authority. When he announced that all had passed the first round, he also emphasized, only 30 people would ultimately be chosen to become knights. The harsh journey was far from over. A second test would be held immediately after. The commander would continue to evaluate them thoroughly to determine who was truly worthy. He asserted that anyone who could pass this test and become a knight under his command would stand at the top of the food chain, living as a predator, never as prey. Hearing those words, the blue-haired boy repeated the phrase in his mind, as if pondering the true meaning of standing at the top of the food chain. Finally, the commander announced the start of the second test. He descended the stairs in silence, revealing that this challenge would be extremely simple, but hidden behind it was no small pressure. Each contestant was required to choose a wooden sword they wanted to use for the test. There was no limit on type or number of swords. What mattered was choosing one that suited their personal fighting style. Roman coldly announced the rules. To pass the second test, contestants must prove their strength by fighting directly against him. The contestants were stunned when they heard Roman would face all of them alone. Worry was evident on their faces, as no one expected their opponent to be the strongest person here. Some contestants began to panic, wondering if Roman really intended to defeat all 120 participants alone, something that seemed impossible. Roman did not expect anyone to win. He set the condition. Anyone who could last 1 minute against him would pass the round and receive a higher reward. Tension filled the atmosphere. Everyone was silent, waiting to see who would dare to step forward first to face Roman. Breaking the silence, a tall, bald man with a scarred, resolute face stepped forward. He declared strongly that he wanted to be the first. With determined eyes and an unwavering face, the man showed his resolve to fight, showing no fear of this harsh challenge. A cleared arena was prepared, and the two fighters took their positions. All eyes focused on the fighting floor, where the first confrontation between Roman and the challenger would take place. Roman asked the participant's name. He stepped forward without hesitation and answered decisively, "Vulcan, sir." Confidence radiated from every gesture of his. Roman Dmitri asked if Vulcan was sure about the sword he had chosen. Without hesitation, Vulcan confidently replied that he was fine with his choice. A soldier in the crowd observed and evaluated Roman. Despite hearing rumors that Roman had defeated the Blood Fangs group, he was still confident he could not be defeated in less than a minute. The referee signaled both sides to prepare and set an hourglass to time the match. A warrior expressed his thoughts. He did not care about the 1-minute test, but only wanted to use this opportunity to observe Roman and decide whether to serve him. The referee flipped the hourglass and declared the start of the match, marking the official confrontation between Vulcan and Roman. Vulcan charged forward, launching a decisive attack with a will that made Roman unable to underestimate him, asserting himself as a formidable warrior. With a fierce face, Vulcan swung his sword powerfully, putting all his strength into the strike to defeat his opponent in the first blow. In a brief moment, Vulcan's eyes widened in surprise, as if sensing something unforeseen was happening. Roman smoothly moved behind Vulcan, calmly and gracefully dodging the strike, causing his opponent to lose balance at the moment of attack. Vulcan suddenly slipped and fell on the arena floor after missing, unable to hide a groan as the situation reversed in an instant. The man glared in confusion, unable to understand what had just happened in a few seconds. Roman had overcome his opponent without even needing a direct attack. His speed and power stunned everyone, clearly demonstrating the difference in class. Roman coldly turned his head, eyes sharp, signaling with a single word, "Next!" Although the first match had just ended, there was no hesitation or fatigue in his voice. A long-haired warrior silently observed, eyes full of astonishment. He had never seen anyone dodge so quickly. Roman's evasion speed was beyond imagination, almost supernatural. In his mind echoed an unanswerable question. How could that happen? As the atmosphere settled, a strange purple-black aura suddenly rose. Another warrior stepped out from the smoke, his whole body radiating heavy killing intent. The spectators clearly felt the upcoming second test would be much harsher than the previous match.